People always say love is what gives a man's life meaning. We grow up with that idea hammered into us like it's some universal law. Find someone, settle down, build a family, and that's when life really starts. But what if that longing to be loved, that urge to be chosen, is the very thing that quietly takes a man's freedom from him? What if the thing we chase for meaning ends up becoming the rope that ties us down? That's the part nobody talks about. Because when you really look around today, you'll notice something uncomfortable. A lot of men are walking away from the old promise. No dramatic announcements, no speeches, just a silent exit. They're choosing solitude over the chaos that often comes with romance. And maybe for the first time in their lives, they're breathing. Most people still look at a single man like he's unfinished, like he's waiting for a woman to come along and complete him. They think solitude is some sad condition a man falls into when love rejects him. But a man who chooses to stand alone isn't running away from love. He's taking back his own power. He's stepping away from a system built on telling him his worth depends on how much he can provide, sacrifice, protect, or fix. A man who learns to stand alone becomes something different. He stops being a servant to emotional chaos and social expectations. He becomes the master of his time, his energy, his purpose. Men have always been told relationships will stabilize them. Find a good woman and everything will fall into place. But look at how relationships actually work for a lot of men today. Once the honeymoon phase fades, the demands creep in. More money, more effort, more emotional labor, more proof that you're committed. What started as love slowly turns into a second job, except this job has no days off and no clear finish line. And the same energy that could shape his life, build his dreams, and strengthen his identity ends up getting drained in the endless effort to keep someone else satisfied. As Marcus Aurelius once said, the energy of the mind is the essence of life. And too many men spend that essence trying to maintain peace in someone else's emotional storm. Solitude flips that whole equation. Being alone gives a man back what the wrong relationship quietly takes away: his focus, his discipline, his inner calm. Imagine waking up on your own terms, not because someone else set the alarm, not because you're walking on eggshells after an argument. You wake up because you decided to. You train your body, you build your business, you take control of your day without anyone questioning where you're going or why you're still working at midnight. You eat when you want, you travel when you want, you spend your money on things that build you, not things that pacify someone else. That's not loneliness, that's sovereignty. And yet society loves calling single men selfish, immature, afraid of commitment. But maybe these men simply understand something most people refuse to see. Dependence wrapped up as love is still dependence. A lot of men didn't lose faith in women. They lost faith in illusions. They saw the cost of giving away their peace just to fit into a story they never wrote. A man who chooses solitude learns how to take care of his own emotional needs. He builds a stable inner world instead of outsourcing his worth to someone else's approval. He isn't running from intimacy. He's redefining what intimacy should be. His loyalty shifts, not toward constant caretaking, but toward self-mastery, brotherhood, purpose, and peace. And from that calm place, something becomes painfully clear. Freedom isn't the absence of love. Freedom is the ability to choose love without fear, without desperation, without needing it to survive. So when people ask, why stay single? Maybe the real question is, why give up your peace? A man who embraces solitude isn't avoiding life. He's finally facing it without illusions, without fog, without noise. He understands something simple and powerful. A man's strength begins the moment he stops depending on someone else to make him whole. And once that truth clicks, everything else changes. Because the next part of this journey is where the real trap reveals itself. How modern relationships quietly chip away at a man's identity without him ever noticing. And this is where things start to get uncomfortable, brother. Because once you step past the warm glow of romance, you start to see the machinery behind it. People love to tell men that relationships liberate them, that being with someone will make life easier, softer, more stable. But what actually happens for most men today is the opposite. The relationship begins like a dream, excitement, affection, passion, that intoxicating rush of feeling understood. But as the months pass, something shifts. The expectations rise, the demands creep in. Suddenly, she wants more time, more control, more reassurance, more emotional output, more proof you're fully invested. It never feels like enough. And what does the average man do? He adjusts, he bends. He starts giving little pieces of himself away, not because he's weak, but because he was raised to believe that sacrifice is love, that being a man means absorbing pressure without complaining. So he starts compromising on his goals. He lets his discipline slide. He softens his ambition. He changes his routine. He shrinks, all to keep the peace. But peace built on compliance isn't peace. It's quiet suffering. This is how identity erosion begins, slowly, silently, almost invisibly. One forgotten hobby here, one abandoned dream there, one, "It's fine, I'll handle it," after another, until one day he wakes up and realizes he's living in a life he didn't choose, a life built around avoiding conflict rather than pursuing purpose. As Nietzsche warned, most people are nothing but the echo of someone else's will. And that's what happens to men who attach their worth to someone else's approval. But here's the part that stings the most. When the weight becomes too heavy, society doesn't support him. It mocks him. If he complains, he's weak. If he leaves, he's a coward. If he stays, he's a fool. And ironically, everything he suffers quietly, because that's what he was taught a strong man does. Meanwhile, the emotional demands keep stacking up until the man himself becomes the product, the provider, the protector, the emotional shock absorber. Everything except free. This is why solitude hits different. When a man steps away from that cycle, he begins to detox emotionally. The pressure fades, the noise disappears. He starts remembering who he is without someone else's moods dictating his day. He stops reacting and starts thinking. He stops chasing attention and starts chasing clarity. He stops begging for understanding and starts understanding himself. And something else happens too, something powerful. Love stops being a need and becomes a choice. When you no longer depend on affection to feel whole, you can love someone without losing yourself. You can walk away without collapsing. You can care without compromising your soul. This is what the philosopher Alain de Botton meant when he said, "The person who least needs another has the greatest capacity to love." Because his love is free, not desperate. Solitude teaches a man to give himself the things he used to beg for: validation, peace, direction, stability. Instead of chasing a partner to feel grounded, he becomes grounded within himself. Instead of seeking attention, he builds a life worth paying attention to. Instead of needing reassurance, he walks with his own conviction. This transformation scares people. They call him cold, detached, emotionally unavailable. But what they're really saying is, you're not easy to control anymore. Because once a man becomes self-sufficient, he stops bending. He stops apologizing for wanting more from life. He stops shrinking to make others comfortable. And that's a threat in a world that benefits from men who stay distracted, drained, and dependent. But here's the real twist, the one no one wants to talk about. When a man masters solitude, something inside him shifts permanently. He becomes unpredictable, not because he's dangerous, but because he can't be manipulated through guilt, neediness, or fear anymore. He becomes calm, centered, quiet, and powerful. His presence changes, his eyes change. He stops seeking permission. He starts choosing his life instead of inheriting expectations. And this shift leads directly to the next stage, the rebirth of a man's purpose, ambition, and deeper power. Because once he stops living for approval, he finally has the strength to live for himself. Once a man detaches his identity from external validation, something almost biological happens, like a reset switch being flipped inside him. He starts seeing the difference between being single and being free. Tons of men are technically single, but they're still trapped, still chasing attention, still scrolling for approval, still fantasizing that the next woman will fix everything the last one broke. That's not freedom. That's dependency without commitment. Freedom doesn't start when you leave a relationship. Freedom starts when you stop needing one to feel steady. A man who embraces solitude reaches a point where he doesn't act to impress anyone. He acts because the action itself aligns with who he's becoming. He doesn't ask if his ambitions are too much. He doesn't wonder if his grind is too intense. He doesn't tone himself down to avoid making someone uncomfortable. He simply moves, he executes, he builds. As Thoreau said, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. But a man who chooses solitude breaks that pattern by rejecting the desperation entirely. He starts traveling when he wants, learning what he wants, investing how he wants, not because he's reckless, but because he's in full command of his direction. Every decision becomes cleaner, sharper, more intentional. There's no negotiation, no second guessing, no guilt-driven compromise. This is where quiet strength grows, not in flashy displays of masculinity, but in the discipline of a man who answers only to himself. Meanwhile, the man who builds his existence around approval ends up wearing invisible chains. He may look like he has stability, the relationship, the routine, the predictable lifestyle, but behind that mask lies a constant exhaustion. His decisions have to pass through someone else's emotional filter. His dreams shrink to stay realistic. His fire dims to keep the peace. Over time, he forgets who he wanted to become before the world told him who he should be. And when he loses himself, nobody notices, because everyone benefited from the version he became. Solitude wipes that entire script clean. It forces you to confront yourself without excuses, without noise, without the emotional movements of someone else controlling your internal thermostat. You start to hear your own thoughts. And those thoughts, which used to get drowned out by obligations or conflict, finally become loud and clear. You realize your time is a currency, one you've been spending on things that never paid you back. You realize your peace isn't negotiable. You realize that the things you once apologized for are actually the source of your strength. You realize that you don't need someone to make you whole because you were never half a person to begin with. And from that clarity, confidence starts to rebuild itself. Not the fake confidence that comes from praise or compliments, not the external confidence that relies on how someone looks at you. I'm talking about the kind of confidence that comes from self-trust, the kind that grows when you know you can rely on your own discipline, your own skills, your own focus, your own drive. It's a calm confidence. A quiet one, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself to be felt. This is where self-reliance becomes the backbone of a man's strength. He learns to sustain himself emotionally, financially, spiritually. He doesn't need someone else to regulate his mood or make him feel secure. He doesn't crumble because someone pulled their affection away. He doesn't chase temporary comfort. He values growth, purpose, direction, things that compound, not things that collapse. This doesn't mean he becomes closed off or bitter. In fact, it's the opposite. Only a self-sufficient man can love deeply because he loves from choice, not fear, not loneliness, not insecurity. He gives because he wants to, not because he's terrified of losing someone. His presence becomes powerful because it's voluntary. He becomes the man who can walk away, not with anger, but with clarity. And that's what makes him rare. But here's the part that most men never see coming. The very moment a man starts rising in his strength and clarity, that's also the moment he becomes most vulnerable to losing everything if he ties that rising power to the wrong person or the wrong relationship. Because the next truth is colder, sharper, and much harder to swallow. It's the truth about what happens when a man puts his stability, his money, his peace, or his future in someone else's hands. This is the part most men don't learn until life hits them hard. The moment you attach your stability, your finances, or your emotional peace to someone else, you take a gamble bigger than you realize. Because every man who's lived long enough has seen how fragile life becomes when it depends on another person's moods, decisions, or loyalty. And yet, nobody warns men about this. They tell you marriage is security. They tell you commitment is maturity. But for a lot of men today, marriage has quietly turned into something else, an unspoken risk contract. You invest your time, your discipline, your years of hard work. You build a home, a life, a sense of direction. But the moment the relationship shifts, not even collapses, just shifts, everything you build can be taken, split, or damaged beyond repair. Divorce courts don't divide your life logically, they divide it emotionally. And when the dust settles, it's the man who often ends up with empty pockets, broken routines, and a future he now has to rebuild from scratch. And the worst part? After all that loss, after losing his home, his savings, and sometimes even access to his own children, society looks at him with silence. No sympathy, no support, just a shrug and the classic, "Well, you chose this." This is why solitude becomes more than a lifestyle. It becomes a kind of shield. Because the man who lives alone owns what he earns. He controls his wealth. He controls his direction. He invests strategically, not emotionally. He builds assets that grow, not attachments that drain. He puts his energy into things that compound, skills, discipline, knowledge, business, not into people who can walk away the moment they feel bored, stressed, or entitled to more. Solitude sharpens the mind. Without emotional chaos eating at his bandwidth, a man becomes capable of long-term thinking. He becomes a builder of legacy, not just a keeper of peace. But this isn't about hating women or avoiding connection forever. It's about clarity. It's about recognizing the cost of giving someone the keys to your entire life before you've even finished building it. Not every woman destroys a man's life, but enough men have lost everything through blind trust that the warning is worth repeating. Trust, but not blindly, as the old saying goes. Your resources, your time, your money, your focus, your energy. These things are sacred. They're the currency of your freedom. Spend them where they multiply, not where they disappear. Because emotional chaos destroys a man far more quietly than poverty ever will. A man can recover from financial loss. He can rebuild a business. He can come back from failure. But constant emotional turmoil? That eats away at his health, his motivation, his fire. Men in toxic relationships stop sleeping well. They stop training. Their focus scatters. Their confidence crumbles. Their goals get buried under arguments, jealousy, manipulation, or the never-ending pressure to prove themselves. Their life becomes a series of emotional fires they didn't start but are expected to put out. And society praises them for suffering through it. "You're a good man," they say, as if self-destruction is noble. But solitude teaches the opposite. Peace is not a luxury. Peace is survival. A man who lives alone learns to protect his mental and emotional resources like oxygen. He eats cleaner, trains harder, rests deeper. His mind becomes clearer. His body becomes stronger. His choices become sharper. There's no shouting matches, no passive-aggressive tension, no emotional landmines. Just quiet, just discipline, just strength. He starts realizing how much of his life he once wasted trying to fix things that were never his responsibility. Freedom from drama isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's waking up without a knot in your chest. It's moving through your day without fear of sudden conflict. It's sleeping each night knowing your mind belongs entirely to you. That kind of peace creates a different kind of man, a grounded man, a deliberate man. A man who doesn't react out of fear or insecurity, who doesn't chase validation, who doesn't crumble because someone withdrew affection. He's not numb, he's disciplined. He understands that real strength isn't endurance, it's avoiding unnecessary suffering altogether. That's the secret no one tells men. The quieter your life becomes, the stronger you get. Solitude doesn't isolate you, it refines you. It strips away the noise, the illusions, the ego-driven decisions, until all that's left is clarity, until all that's left is you. And when a man finally stands alone with himself, without distractions, without lies, without roles to perform, he sees the truth. No one is coming to save him. No one owes him understanding. No one is responsible for carrying his pain. And strangely, that realization doesn't weaken him, it builds him. Being single isn't isolation, it's liberation. It's not about running from love, but about refusing to be enslaved by it. The man who embraces solitude doesn't reject intimacy. He elevates it, he purifies it, he understands what most never do. Love without freedom is just attachment, and attachment without awareness is suffering. In the end, the world may still whisper that you're incomplete without a partner, but you'll know better. You'll understand that peace is the highest form of love, that emotional independence is worth more than approval, that the real measure of a man isn't how many people depend on him, it's how little he depends on anyone else. And when you can sit with yourself and feel no fear, when your silence feels like power instead of punishment, that's when solitude becomes something else entirely. Not emptiness, but ascension. Not loneliness, but clarity. Not withdrawal, but mastery. Your life stops being reactive. It becomes intentional. Every decision becomes deliberate. Every action becomes sacred. So to every man walking this path, Choose solitude not to escape life but to rise above it. Build your discipline. Guard your peace. Construct a future that belongs entirely to you. Let others chase comfort. You chase clarity. Because once you've tasted true freedom, dependence feels like death, and no one can take a man away from himself once he fully belongs to himself.